Today I'm going to show you how to make a ceramic bas-relief sculpture using a 3D model as your pattern, a plaster slip cast mold, and ceramic slip. Before jumping in, I want to give a quick shout out to David Bogus, a ceramic artist and a close friend who generously shared advice on mold making and slip casting with me while I worked through this first attempt. A bas-relief is a type of sculpture where the form sort of projects slightly from the background, creating the illusion of depth while remaining mostly two-dimensional. This format works especially well for ceramics because it allows you to make a one-piece mold with a simple two-part plaster jacket. For this project, use one of your existing 3D models as the pattern. I chose a model of Persephone. It's one that I made recently, and she's holding a pomegranate and wheat. Before doing anything else, remove all of the undercuts from your model. An undercut is any area that overhangs or traps the mold. In 3D printing, overhangs are managed with supports, but in ceramics they're a disaster because you can't pull the pattern out from the plaster or you can't pull the ceramic out from the mold without it cracking. So start by flattening your model on the y-axis to make it suitable for bas-relief. Then create a rectangle for your backing plane and position it just behind the figure. And this does two things. It gives you a flat base for mold making, and it creates extra room for textures or background elements. Now we need to deal with the undercuts. If you're anything like me, the first instinct was to use a modifier like the shrink wrap, and that sounds great, but it tends to give the sort of Han Solo frozen in carbonite effect. So instead, I just sculpted it manually, and you can too. Select on that background rectangle and use your sculpt tools to push and inflate the background surface around the figure until all of the problem areas are filled in. I use the draw tool for this to gradually build the surface around Persephone. And you're going to lose some detail in tight areas. And mine was especially noticeable in the wheat, but that's okay. Slip cast clay stays leather hard for a while because of the deflocculants in the slip, so you can go back and sort of carve these out later after your ceramic is out of the mold. So once the form is resolved, we can add some background textures. For this project, I used a geometry node set up to create these repeating textural elements. I'll cover that workflow in another tutorial, but for now, just make sure that your textures do not overlap the outer edges of the rectangle. And once you're happy with the design and you're sure there's no undercuts, you can go ahead and 3D print your pattern. Now it's time to make the mold. Place your printed pattern inside the container. I used a plastic storage container from Target, and it had a little bit of an angle to it. And so you can coat everything now with Murphy's oil soap, and that's your release agent, and I was pretty generous with it. Next, you're going to mix up a batch of #1 pottery plaster. So you're going to add plaster slowly to the cold water by sifting it through your fingers, and let the plaster sink naturally until islands form on the surface and they stop disappearing. And at that point, you can gently mix by hand until smooth, and you're kind of churning under the surface. Now you can slowly pour the plaster into the container, covering the pattern while leaving some room at the top. And this extra space at the top is important because we're going to add sort of a coffin lid to the top. So I'm going to tap the outside of the mold container again to release any trapped air bubbles, and let the plaster set for about 30 minutes. So once firm, flip the mold over and tap on the bottom to remove the pattern. If you've removed all the undercuts successfully, the pattern should release pretty easily. I used a flat bar to gently pry around the edges. And one small chunk broke off in my mold, but that was pretty easy to glue back in place. So now we're going to let the mold dry for another hour or two. Then use a rasp to smooth and flatten the sides so the mold can go back into the container upside down. Seal the outer edges with plasticine clay, and then place the original pattern back into the mold cavity. I also use plasticine to seal the pattern seams in there. So next, Carve 3 shallow holes in the plaster using a spoon, and these will create interlocking keys so your second mold lid fits on and aligns properly. Now coat everything again with Murphy's oil soap. Mix a fresh batch of plaster and pour it over the top to create the second half of the mold, or the coffin lid. Once the lid sets, separate the two halves and remove all the plasticine. And let's let both mold pieces dry for at least 4 to 5 days. So now create the pour hole. I'm going to use a screwdriver to carve out through the lid so that my funnel will fit in the opening. And this coffin lid creates back pressure, so what you'll be doing is filling up the void with slip, and this will kind of make sure that it all stays sealed inside of there, and you'll get a flat backing to your mold. To cast it, seal all the mold seams with plasticine, and let's wrap the entire mold tightly with rubber bands and set it on a level surface. Then pour in the ceramic slip into the funnel until it's full. So over the next few hours, check it periodically and top it off. The plaster mold will pull moisture from the slip and the liquid level will dry. Leave the filled mold 1 or 2 days depending on the wall thickness and clay body. Then you're ready to demold. So remove the top, flip the mold over, tap on the bottom, and release your casting. At this point, let the bas-relief rest loosely under plastic for a day or 2. And when the clay reaches leather hard, you can go back and refine all the details. Then I applied 3 coats of white underglaze directly to the dry sculpture, and once dry, I fired it to a cone 06. While waiting for the main sculpture to dry and ready to be fired, I created additional decorative elements. So I modeled these flowers and leaves in Blender, and I 3D printed them and painted them. And once all those were printed and painted, I attached the back to a 3D printed keyhole out little base, and it gave me something to glue all of the elements around the outside too. And it can be wall hung. So if you found this helpful, subscribe to more tutorials combining Blender, digital fab, and ceramics. I'll be following up on these geometry node videos, textures, how to make the leaves and flora and fauna, and 3D printed ceramic embellishments.